Hello, friends. Welcome to A Little View podcast, the podcast where the perspective may be small, but the conversations are anything but small. I'm Gwen, your podcast host, a soon-to-be dietitian, a health coach, and an advocate. This is a podcast where we talk about things that aren't talked about. We're the voice for the unrepresented. We're having empowering conversations about healing your mind, body, and soul. And we're bringing on guests to share their inspiring stories. This is A Little View podcast. And I just want to say a little disclaimer that this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Always talk to your doctor about your own health journey first. And today I'm joined with Erin. She is a wife, a mother, and one of her kids actually has achondroplasia. So I actually met her son a while ago before even meeting her. And then she is now an author of a book called 4 Lives Before 40. I actually had the opportunity before I read her book to stay with her and her family, and they were so welcoming and so nice. And it also just gave me a different view of reading the book, just how amazing this woman is and how she has gone through so much, but is still persevering and being there for her kids. So while I was reading the book as well, I wanted to hug her throughout the whole thing. And I know so many readers felt the exact same way. So I just wanted a chance to have Erin on my podcast and talk about her book and just her life and everything post her book. So without further ado, I would love for Erin just to introduce herself a little more.
You are so sweet, and that was the best introduction. I always love it when people ask me to introduce myself because I always, in the back of my head, think, oh gosh, where do I start? Because I have lived a lot of lives. So a little bit about me. I live in Texas and I am a mom. I've got 4 kiddos ranging from age 9 all the way up to 17. I've got 2 boys and 2 girls. I am a counselor by trade. I'm a school counselor for my full-time job, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor. So I have a small private practice. Yeah, that's a little bit about me, I guess. Just the very basic.
And as we said, you do have a book now. And for listeners who have not read your book, can you give us a little synopsis of what it's about?
Sure. So my book is called 4 Lives by 40, and that title literally defines kind of what my life has been like. I always kind of, when people ask me, tell me a little bit about yourself, I always joke and say, well, I've lived enough lives for multiple people. And then when I started kind of thinking about it, I realized I've lived 4 very distinct lives. And so I've had a lot of really amazing things happen in my life, but I've had a lot of tragic things happen in my life as well. And each period of my life is kind of broken into those 4 different stages. And all of it happened before I turned 40. And so the book, when I wrote it, partially was because I don't know how many times I've had people say, Erin, your life could be like a Lifetime movie. And I'm like, oh, I know. Or I've had people say, you should write a book. And so finally I decided that I was at a point in my life where I wanted to write the book. I wanted to share my story so that other people could know that they're not alone, that other people have gone through this, and that there can be beautiful things that come out of tragic circumstances. And just as a way for people to know that you can persevere through those things, but that life isn't always pretty, right? Like my book, you read it, it's not always pretty, right? There's a lot of messiness that happens in it, and I think it's important to put that out there too, and not just this picture perfect life that people show a lot of times on social media.
Yeah. But I also think too, looking at you now and seeing what you've been through, like you would never expect you've been through all that. I mean, we all have our own story and we all have gone through so much. So many times I was reading that, I was like, I'm done. I wouldn't even be able to keep going. We're going to get through this later in my questions, but there was so many times when you kept being like, okay, I know God has a plan. I know God has a plan. And you kept like seeing faith in your story.
I will agree with that. The faith has been the constant throughout all of it. And I'll be completely honest, I don't know how someone would get through the things that I've gone through without a relationship with God, which is why I wanted to share it. I don't market this book as a like Christian book or things like that,
Yeah.
mainly because I would probably be crucified by the Christian book audience because like I said, it's not pretty. My faith is very strong, but it's not necessarily what some people might picture as ideal Christianity, I
Yeah.
guess. But to me it was important. And I will say, like, I got asked all the time through different like stages of my life, I don't know how you do that, like how did you get through? And my answer, jokingly but but it was also honest, was, well, prayers and caffeine, because you just got to
Yeah.
keep going. Like for me, it was never an option not to. I've got children
Yeah.
and that I have to be a mom for.
What is the point where you were like, I want to write about this?
I kind of knew for several years that I wanted to write a book about it, just because it's one of those things that I was like, if I don't get this down, like, no one would believe it. Like if I just like, I feel like if someone watched this on a Lifetime show, they'd be like, oh, it's just a drama of Lifetime. But in all
Mhm.
reality, it's my actual life. And so
Yeah.
every bit of it is truthful, and stuff that has happened to me. And so I kind of felt like for me, I wanted to get it down just so that it was there and documented, and so
Yeah.
it could help others. But also kind of, I wrote it at this point in my life because I was at a point in my own healing on this journey that
Yeah.
I felt like I could write this book and it would be therapeutic to write it. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
necessarily traumatic to write it.
Yeah. And you describe so many lives, as we said, a death, also your son's diagnosis, also abuse in a relationship. What would you say was the hardest life you lived? And what would you say was like the more rewarding?
I think, I mean, all of it is, I feel like in every stage of the life, even I would say the most rewarding has been probably life four, the one I'm currently living. I kind
That's
of feel
true.
like it's a dream, to be completely honest. After all the things I've gone through, I'm like, okay, I've arrived, like all is well with the world, you know. So it is the most rewarding, but even in that life, there was things that carried over from the previous
Mhm.
lives that we had to deal with as my husband and I as a couple. But I would say
Yeah.
it's hard to pinpoint a hardest. I would say either life two or three. Life two is where I dealt with all the domestic abuse and stalking and all of that stuff. It's also when my son was born. I wouldn't say that his diagnosis was hard. It was challenging, all of his medical things. Life two is just
Yeah.
challenging because, like, achondroplasia is something where either you have, like, some kids have no complications, or you
Yeah.
have situations like my son who has like all the complications. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that was difficult, especially in the midst of dealing with domestic violence. But it's hard.
Mhm.
I would say it's a tie with life three, because when I had gotten remarried and my husband died. In the book, I talk about losing my dad and my mom and my grandma, who were all people who were very, very close to me. But it is a different kind of grief when you lose a partner, when you lose a spouse. And so that was a whole nother level of pain. And so I don't know. I'd have to say it'd be a tie hardest between two and three, life two and three.
And you shared about it in your book, but when your husband died and your new husband, did you ever or did anyone ever say like, "Oh, you're just trying to replace him?"
Oh my gosh, yes. So interestingly enough, my late husband that passed away,
Mm.
Chris, he was in law enforcement, and my current husband is also in law enforcement. But I did not know that when we met. I did
Yeah.
not know at all that he was in law enforcement. And so some people are like, "Oh, you're just a badge bunny. You're trying to replace him with another cop."
Yeah.
They would say these type things, and it was hurtful for me because that was never ever my intention. And even my kids, my older kids at one point at one point said, "Mom, like, I don't want you to try to replace Chris." And my answer to them was always, there is no replacing Chris. There's not. And even with my husband now, I'm so grateful for him, because he has left all the space in the world for me to love both Chris and him. And he knows that, like, I have all the love in my heart for him, but it is a different part of my heart than I had the
Oh.
love for Chris, because that love is still there. And so for us, we still celebrate Chris. We celebrate his birthday every year. We have his pictures on the wall. We celebrate the things with him as a family with my current husband. I couldn't ask for someone to support me more than that. But yeah, for sure. People did say that. People did say, "Oh, you're just trying to replace." And I was like, I am not at all, because there is no replacing.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, really all that matters is what your new husband thinks. Everyone else, it does not matter.
Absolutely.
Through every trial that you went through, you thought about giving up. You thought about just throwing the towel in because you were like, this is crazy. This is so much.
I I never got to a point where I thought about throwing a towel in. That's just not, I don't think, who I am. But I
Yeah.
definitely, one book of the Bible that most people do
Mhm.
not like because it is not pleasant to read is Job. Job is a book that I kept going back to because, in for people who aren't familiar with Job basically, there's kind of this competition between the devil and God, and God is like, the devil is basically saying we can make Job like forsake you, like say that you're not God. And essentially, all of these awful things happen to Job. And throughout the whole thing, he never forsakes God. He never turns his back on God and always sees God as a savior. And for like in the first two lives, like there were things that happened with, the death of my dad and my grandma and family members and a divorce that I kind of felt like Job, but I was like, okay, I don't have it as bad as Job. And then even in the second life, when I was dealing with the domestic violence and the stalking and all of that. Again, I felt like Job, but I was like, I don't have it that bad. But by the time I got to life three and my husband died, I did. I remember a moment where I just said, I feel like Job. I feel like I am Job now.
Yeah.
And that was probably the rock bottom. But at the same time, it was one of those things that I never wanted to throw in the towel because it was like, if Job didn't throw in the towel, I'm not throwing in the towel. I'm not blaming God for
Yeah.
this. This is part of his plan for me. I don't know what that is because at that moment, I'm like, God, I have no clue. I need you to show me because I
Yeah.
don't know, but I'm not going to throw in the towel.
And the way you described your husband's death, that was just so gut-wrenching. And to know that you were like, okay, I'm gonna keep going. God, I still trust you no matter what, is such a faith-driven woman, just knowing that you're like, I'm gonna keep going. Because as we said, I'm sure so many people would just be like, I'm giving up by now. Like, what do you want from me?
And believe me, there were plenty of conversations with God where I was just like, I don't get it. I don't know what your plan is for me. I need you to show me something or calm my heart because I don't understand and I don't get it. There were plenty of those moments, but at the same time, I have four children that I'm, you know, trying to be a rock for, and not that I faked any of it with them because they knew that I was grieving and they grieved with me. We went to like grief counseling and all of that stuff to make sure that we were working through it. But even with that, like you're still sad. I kind of I think I don't remember if I said it in the book or not, but there were so many times I cried in the shower because I knew my kids couldn't hear me crying if I was crying in the shower. Because you got to let those things out, and there
Yeah.
is sadness and there's anger and there's all those stages that you go through in that grief process, and I went through them all at the same time. I held on to that faith that I don't know what the plan is, God, but I know that you have one. And I think what I held on to too is before his death, I always kind of thought God has a plan for this. I just don't know it yet. And at that point, I kind of told myself too, I might not see his plan for me in this lifetime. My reward might be heaven. I
Yeah.
might not ever see it earthside what his
Yeah.
plan is. I might not know until I'm there. But even then, that was some comfort to me because I was like, well, I know that that's where my husband is, and I know that I'll be there one day.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Job story, but was there any other story that were significant moment where you kept trusting God? Like what made you in the beginning know to trust God?
I have been in church since I was a baby. My
Okay.
parents had me in church, but that
Yeah.
didn't always necessarily mean that my walk was there, that I was at
Mm-hmm.
that point in my life that I was
Yep.
believing all the things and really there. My strongest faith catalyst in my life is my grandmother. That woman poured so much wisdom into me throughout my life about God. And it was in the way she talked about him was about how God is your friend and you just have conversations with him. She didn't talk about this is how you pray, this is how you do this. She was like, well, you just got to talk with God, Erin. And so
Yeah.
for her, it was an all day thing. And that's kind of how I pray too, is I start in the morning, open with a prayer. I have conversations throughout the day with God, and then I end with a prayer in the evening because it's a
Mhm.
conversation. She was the one who kind of imparted that on me for sure about
Mhm.
how important that was. And I think about her, and I think she played a big role in my grieving the loss of my husband too, because my grandpa, he died fairly young too. He was in his early 60s when he passed away, and my grandmother, that was in like 1990, and my grandmother lived until 2013, and she was a widow all those years. She didn't remarry. And her faith never wavered, not a single drop. And I can't help but think that her example she set for me was part of what helped me through that and know that like God has a plan for it all too.
Yeah.
And I say it throughout the book too. Like when I pray prayers like most people are like, what are you talking about? But like I pray prayers like, God, I need you to close the doors. I am dense, Lord. I
Yeah.
need you to close the doors that need to be closed, open the ones that need to be open, and I need some neon signs to tell me what to do because I'm gonna pick the wrong thing every time.
Yeah.
I mentioned it several times in the book about neon signs and the different neon signs that God gave me throughout all of the lives and continues to give me. But I'm very thankful for him because I joke all the time. I'm like, I'm pretty dense, God. You got to shut
She's
the doors that need to be shut, open the ones that need to be opened, and I need some neon signs to tell me what to do because I'll pick the wrong thing every single time if you don't.
I think you just saying your story is also showing people that if you have God with you, you can get through anything.
Well, and that's my hope too, because I mean, I love sharing my story with people and I love sharing my faith with people, but I'm sure people are always like, man, that's interesting because, I have a sleeve tattoo, I have a nose piercing, I've now been married 4 times and I'm
Yeah.
40. And that doesn't look like the traditional Christian that most people think about when they think about that. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I think that's important to share too, the messiness, because I can have a non-traditional looking life all day long, but it doesn't change the fact
For
of
sure.
how God has moved in my life and how much I love him. And so I think that's important too, because I think so many times people get, I don't know, this certain image of what a Christian
Yeah.
is in their mind. And I wouldn't be it. Like if you ask someone for a textbook, like what does a textbook Christian look like? It would not be me. I would not show up in that definition, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it shows that you can't also judge a book by its cover because you don't know what's inside of it. What was the biggest moment that was kind of like a like I can finally breathe moment? Like I know your son's medical treatment was a big him being able to go on Voxzogo was a big thing. But what was like the big one, would you say?
Oh gosh, there's been so many. I feel like my son's like his medical stuff keeps getting better. Like
Yeah.
just last week, we found out he no longer has sleep apnea, which was the whole
Wow,
thing
that's
that
so awesome.
catalyzed him having. He had a tracheostomy and was on all kinds of breathing stuff and oxygen and tubes galore and 24-hour nursing for 4.5 years, like all the things. And so to go from that to nothing, we just go to bed, we
Yeah.
just say our prayers and go to
Yeah.
sleep and there's nothing attached to them is like
Yeah.
bananas to me. So that just continues to get better. But I think outside of that, I don't know, there's so many little moments. I feel like honestly, I feel like different things in life for made me feel like,
Mhm.
okay, I've arrived. I've arrived. Like things are better, you know. My husband now is amazing. The job I have now is a dream. I joke about it with my friends all the time. They're like, Erin, don't ever leave that job. And I'm like, I'm not planning on it. I want to retire from there because it's really
Yeah.
awesome. There's been so many little things along the way. And even I'll be honest, like when I finally court wise got a lifetime protective order for me and my son against
Yeah.
the ex in life three or life two. Even that felt like a huge sigh of relief. So there's been lots of
Yeah.
things that just felt like, okay, it's better, and it's just been all those things that have added up along the way that I'm just like, okay, it's better.
Yeah. And as we talk about like don't judge a book by its cover, it's also crazy. And this is like a random side note, but if I were to look at your family, like I would never think also like your husband now, so your son name is Zeke, and I would have just thought that was Zeke's dad. Like the
Yes.
way that
Well,
man treats him.
he is Zeke's bio dad. He
Yeah.
doesn't know at all.
Mhm. Yeah.
And honestly, my husband Chris that passed away, he's who Zeke saw as dad really,
Mhm.
and so he'll still talk about my dad Chris, and he calls him my dad
Mhm.
Chris, but to him, my husband is dad, and so like he and my husband's, we're in the process of him adopting him legally so that
Yeah.
he is so we all we're all the Elswoods, me, him, and my son. But to me that's been a blessing too, because I'll be completely honest, when we first started dating, and I think I know I included this in the book, but like that was something that I thought might be a no-go. Like I was like, this might not go anywhere because he's a few years younger than me. Not by much, but a couple. He has no biological children. And so I was
Mhm.
terrified to
Oh
ask the
yeah.
question, do you want to have more kids? Because after my youngest son was born, I got my
Mhm.
doctor. It was kind of a hilarious situation, but I talk about it in the book too. But I got my tubes tied, and because 4 kids is enough for anyone. And so I knew that I wasn't having more kids. And so I was terrified that his answer was going to be like, yes, I want more children. And then that was going to be it. And that we just weren't going to be. And I literally was in tears when he told me. He was like, he looked at me and he goes, Erin, my family would be ecstatic to have 4 more grandkids. Like my parents would be so
Yeah.
happy to have 4 more grandkids. I don't need it. I don't need a biological child of my own. And I was like literally in tears because like that was the one hang up that I was like, if anything's gonna make this not work, it's gonna be him wanting another
Yeah.
child.
That again just shows like it was meant to be. And as we've talked about you being a faith-driven woman, what was some Bible verses that, like, got you through, would you say?
Oh man, gosh, I'd have to pull up I literally so there's not I wouldn't say there's one for sure.
Okay.
Job was my go-to when I was feeling bad. I would go to Job
Okay.
again, just because I know that it was one that would pull me through. But I
Mhm.
literally, it's hilarious, which I need to get my Bible rebound because like when you open it, the back
Right.
cover, like on the back pages, I have one page and I literally just wrote verses for widows. And so I started
Okay.
writing down all these verses that were ones that like pulled me through, right? Like that
Okay.
completely got me through those moments when I was dealing with being a widow because that's a title no one ever wants, especially not in
For
your
sure.
30s. I wish I could say there's just one. I know there's one that I go to a lot that let tomorrow worry about itself. You know, there's a verse
Yeah.
about that, and there's another one. I think the other one's in Proverbs, but I'm never good at what book and what number. Which
I'm
again,
not either.
I'm not your picture perfect Christian, but there's another one that says it says listen to my instructions and do not disregard them. And so that's one that's important to me because again, always asking God for the neon signs and for him to tell me because I'm like I'll
Yeah.
pick the wrong one. I'm trying to listen,
Yeah.
God, but you got to help me with these because I want to listen, but I got to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. I think I agree though. There's so many times I don't even know where it's at. I'm just like I like know parts of it in my head. I don't know what story it's in. So I totally get that. And now releasing your book, I'm sure you got a lot of positive feedback, but was there any like pullback like from
Oh,
people like why did you release this stuff about whoever and me?
so yeah, there was backlash, a little bit,
Yeah.
but really the main backlash was from people who were described in the book, which of course, I changed the names because
Yeah,
I got to be safe and make sure I don't
for
get
sure.
sued. But all the stuff in there is all factual stuff that can be backed up by either
Yeah.
police reports or legal documents or whatever. But Life 2, that one was interesting because there's some nasty Amazon reviews that came from that, like on the book and stuff like that, saying that I just make up my own stories. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is all
Yeah.
backed up by facts. Like, I literally, we have a paper trail a mile long of the police reports on this, you know. But there was backlash there. And then there is, I feel like I haven't gotten much backlash. I think for me, my biggest concern was when people at work found out and started reading it. And then I was
Okay.
like, oh my gosh, what are people at work going to think about me? And our head of school, his administrative assistant came in one day and she was like, Erin, can I give you a hug? I was like, yeah, what's wrong? And she was like, I'm just reading your book and I feel like I just need to give you a hug.
Exactly.
And so it made me smile and it was really sweet. But like I think I was nervous about that because, you know,
Yeah.
I'm a school counselor at the school and I'm a mental health and wellness counselor in middle school. And I want to make sure that the families aren't like this crazy lady is like, you know, the counselor for our kids or something, you know. And so I think that was nerve wracking for me, but I've gotten positive reviews for the most part. The only real backlash I guess are from a few people who've been mentioned in the book in the different lives, like, you know, friends of theirs or family members have said ugly things, but you know, there's always going to be some of that.
Exactly. There's always going to be people that want to try to bring you down. And now would you say that even throughout that, you're still so grateful that you released the book?
I am. I really am. I think I was shocked more than anything. I assumed, I'll be honest, like, and I talk about this in the book, but I grew up in a really small town and everybody knows everybody and everyone's in everyone's business. And so I had a feeling a lot of people from that small town would read the book
Yeah,
just because they wanted to know the dirt on what happened. And so, and there was a lot of those that read it just because they wanted to see who or
for
who
sure.
wasn't mentioned in the book. But I was really encouraged by people who reached out who I didn't know, you know, people who I've never met who don't know my story, who had read it and talked about it being impactful for them and that they had, and it was, I think the most impactful thing for me was when people who read it told me how they resonated with different parts of my story or different lives. And I would have people reach out. One of the most touching things I had someone reach out from that little small town and they shared a story with me about my dad that was one that had never heard before. And
Yeah.
their husband had told them the story because they were telling their husband about the book, my book, they're reading it. And they're like, oh, yeah, Aaron's dad, he was such a great man. And like told the story. And then she contacted me to tell me the story. And it was a story I had actually never even heard. And so those type of things were really sweet because, you know, my parents are, my dad's been gone for, gosh, 14 years. It'll be 14 years in August, and my mom's been gone for, gosh, 11 years. And so it's one of those things that, like, to hear those people reach out and say, I loved reliving the lives of your parents. Like, you did such a great job of like describing them. That was so accurate.
Yeah.
Or sharing with me, I cried with you through this because I've gone through it and it really helped me see that things can improve. And I was like, that's the why. That's why I did this, was
Yeah.
for people to see that they're not alone and it can get better.
Yeah. And I'm sure even throughout those negative things, those are what pushes you through. Hearing people say like your story helped me or your story showed that I'm not alone, I feel like that alone just shows you why you released the book. Do you think there's like, we'll say, top 3 lessons that your lives have taught you?
Oh yeah, for sure. From the first life, I always is it's really kind of the root of the first life is I married way too young, right? I married young and for the wrong reasons and came back to bite me in the butt, right? And so I think that lesson has changed my point of view of how I parent my kids, right? Like I encourage my kids all the time, you don't have to rush, just enjoy life. Like go experience things, go do things. You don't have to rush to grow up, right? And so I think that was my big takeaway from from that life was that, well, two things I guess, was one that like I want my kids to really experience life before they decide to like settle down or do those things so that
Yeah.
they really know who they are before they try to jump into a marriage or any big situation like that. And the other thing from that life too is losing my dad was only 51 when he died. And so like for me, it really taught me that I need to live life every day for what it is. But I will tell you that's the big lesson that I got from, well, one of the big lessons that I also got when my husband died was that like I try to live every day as my last because I don't know, like
Yeah.
we're not promised tomorrow. And so I try to live each day as my last. The other big one that I think my big aha moment, especially with in terms of like God's role in things, was when my husband died. It was 2 weeks. His death happened 2 weeks before our 1 year wedding anniversary. So we weren't even married for a full year.
Mhm.
And I kept thinking to myself, why would God give me someone who was so perfect for me and so good for me and then take him away, right?
Yeah.
So quickly. And my lesson that I learned from that was had God not orchestrated that and had that happen, I would have been single the rest of my life because life one and life two, those marriages were such a hot mess that I would have never gotten married again. Like had I not had that brief amount of time of seeing what a good, healthy marriage looked like with Chris,
Yeah.
I would not have ever been willing to be married ever again, right? And because I got that glimpse of this is what a good marriage can look like, it opened the doors for me when I was ready to start dating after his death that, okay, I'm not rushing anything, but maybe there is someone out there for me. Because I know if that hadn't
Yeah.
happened, I would still be single and probably a little bit
Yeah.
bitter too.
Yeah. That is amazing, and it is just, and I keep saying the word amazing, but that is just, we'll say, extraordinary, the way God just moves and the way he shows you things without even realizing that it's happening until later. When you were writing this, was there also moments of hard times writing this? Because I mean, you're talking about very vulnerable stuff. You're also opening your life up to so many people. So was it difficult just writing this, and was there so many times you had to stop and take a break and then come back to it?
Oh, for sure. I don't think I was ever really scared about people reading it or sharing my story with
Mhm.
people because I'm a pretty open book. Like literally, I tell people about my life all the time because I think it's important to share to try to help others. But
Yeah.
I think there were definitely times where it was challenging from life too and the domestic violence stuff. I deal with a little bit of PTSD from that, and
Yeah.
I'm doing much better with it. It was
Mhm.
really bad at the beginning, but now it's just every once in a while there's a flare up, something will happen, it'll be a trigger, and I'll get a little. I can tell that I'm getting overwhelmed. But like there were times during, especially writing that section, that were just I just had to stop because it was
Yeah.
I had to relive all of those moments, you know, and all of
And
those things that I went through. And of course, while I'm writing it, I'm wanting it to be accurate. So I'm pulling up, I have saved a list of like all the times that I called the police and like what the call numbers were because I knew I'd need it if something happened to me. They need to know like these are
yeah.
all the times, these are the call numbers, these are the things. And so I had documents like that that I referenced while writing the book and that was a little bit hard. Like some of those moments were moments where I was just like, gosh, this is still a lot, you know. And so even though I've done therapy and worked through those things and I'm in a lot better place, there were moments for sure writing that I had to pause. And then there was definitely moments of sadness where the grief took over when I was writing Life 3 and I had to pause, but it was almost it was the grief of losing my husband, but also just the thankfulness for how God has provided since, and so it was a mix of the two. But yeah, there was definitely times where I had to stop and was like, okay, we're gonna pause this for a little bit. I'm gonna have to come back and
Yeah.
work on this in a little bit later.
Because I'm sure it would bring you back to that time. As you said, you were looking at these times and these numbers. That image pulled you back to where you obviously don't want to be.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those, like a lot when I was writing those things, a lot of those documents and things that I looked at were honestly things I hadn't looked at in a long time because I didn't
Yeah.
want to, right? Like I didn't want to
Yeah.
have to look at those things, but I thought it was important to have the story be accurate, like not just, of course it's my account of what I was feeling and going through all of this, but
Mhm.
I wanted it to be factual and accurate too. And so I was glad that I am one of those crazy spreadsheet ladies who likes to document all the
Yeah.
things because they were there when I needed them to look at it and make sure that I was getting it right.
And now, my last question, I always ask my guests, but obviously it's different. What would you tell your younger self in, we'll say, life two or life three? What would you tell them now, looking back and being able to know what you know now?
It's interesting because I get asked a lot, would I change any of it? And the answer is no, I wouldn't change any of it because then I wouldn't be who I am today if I changed any of
Exactly.
it. And so, I tell my kids that all the time. I was like, I wouldn't have you if I hadn't have experienced that.
Mm,
And so there's nothing I would change, but I think I would tell my younger self, even though I have all the faith, like I've got so much faith in God, I think I would tell my
yeah.
younger self, don't grow weary. Like don't grow weary. Like just know that God is going to bring it all to his glory, whether it's in this lifetime or the next. And because I think there were times and moments where I just grew weary, right? Like my faith never floundered in that sense, but man was I weary. And so I think
Mhm.
I would tell myself, hang in there, like don't grow weary, like it's going to work out.
And what would you say, and I know I said that was my last question, but also what would you say looking back, how have you changed the most? As in which life, or would you even say you developed more self-love for yourself? How would you say you've changed the most?
Oh, for sure. I think the biggest change probably came after like two or three, probably both of them, honestly. After
Mm,
two, I really worked hard. I was in therapy because all the domestic
mhm,
violence and all the things that I needed some therapy, even therapists need therapy, right?
for sure.
And so I was in therapy and I really worked a lot on loving myself. And one thing that I did that kind of silly but really beneficial was it was like a divorce bucket list. So I had this list of things to do that all were kind of centered around self-love. So like it was like go out to eat alone, go to a movie by yourself, buy
Mhm,
yourself flowers. It was like all of these things that you could do to prove that you can love yourself enough and do these things on your own, and you are a whole person without having another person there. Like you have to be completely whole as a person as you're like by yourself before you can be good for anyone else. And so I started working on that list and got through quite a bit of it, but not all of it. And then after my late husband passed away, after he died, I came back to the list and I changed it. I edited it as like a widow bucket list. And it
mhm,
was things that I continued to do there because a lot of the things after life two were things that I changed for myself of expectations of saying like I will not settle for less than XYZ. Like I need to have this list of things in a partner. If they have any of these characteristics or any of these qualities, it's a no-go. Do not pass go. There is no second date.
mhm.
There's none of that. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that. And this is one of it's funny because like quoting myself, but I think it's one of my favorite lines I've ever used in my life. When I was dating my late husband, when we first started talking and we were just casually talking and stuff, he asked me, he was like, do you think you'll ever get married again? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, what do you mean you don't know? I was like, well, I know what I bring to the table and I'm comfortable eating alone. And he like kind of looked shocked and I thought I was going to scare him off at that point because it's a pretty big statement. Like I know what I bring to the
Yeah.
table and I'm okay eating alone. Like I can have someone or
Yeah.
not. Like it doesn't matter. But a lot of that came from that like that reflection of what are the things, the qualities I need to have for a good partner and what can I do to make myself better so that I am complete in and of myself without someone and someone is just an addition to make life better, right? To make things better and we can grow each other. And so there was that. And then so after that was one big revelation or change for me. And the other big revelation and change for me was after Chris died. I really, truly started living my life as if it were my last day. Chris and I had done a lot of travel together, and I talk about how important travel is in the book for me,
Yes.
but it was really important for me to not stop traveling and exploring and adventuring after he died because he wasn't there to do it with me. And so I talk in the book about that first solo travel trip I took by myself after he died and how impactful it was. But those things were so important in developing who I am today. And I'm so thankful because my husband now loves, we are adrenaline junkies, and he loves to travel and do all the fun things as much as I do. And so it's great because we get to continue that. But it was really important to me after Chris died that that not stop because he wasn't there. And so that was a growth thing for me too, is I was like, I'm gonna live each day as if it's my last because tomorrow is not
Yep.
promised.
I definitely want and need to stand by that more. And I also want to say is thank you so much for being on my podcast. And I hope all my listeners listening to this, if they haven't read your book, I am definitely going to link it, is to read it and get it because literally I ordered it before. I think I ordered it like right away, like that next day, and then I got it and I like couldn't put it down. So I definitely encourage everyone to read it. And thank you again, and for just being vulnerable, sharing your story, and also now opening up more. So thank you again. So I hope everyone enjoyed it, and make sure to like and subscribe for more episodes. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.